Welcome to another edition of Cattle Chatter. I'm Susan Littlefield, and wow, cash continues to be king. We're going to talk about how the futures are reacting to everything, but many surprise, and that's what we're going to start out with a Tuesday cash trade. Brad Kooima joins us. He is with Kooima Kooima Varilek out of Sioux Center, Iowa. And you look at this, a Tuesday trade is not something we're used to seeing.
You're 100% right. Thanks for having me on. Um, the fact that it's out of the South, that's back-to-back weeks that we saw that. The North, largely, my country here has not done anything yet. Everybody pretty optimistic. Why wouldn't you be? That's been the pattern here. The trend's your friend. But the South coming along, first at 235, which there was just a tiny bit of that happened Friday late, didn't get reported. Bulk of the trade last week in the South was 232. So 235 was a nice step. And then there was a little bit of trade on that Fed cattle exchange. How about that price discovery at an auction? Imagine that. 238 to as much as 240. And there's a tiny bit of that's happening now again, but solidly higher in the South, which is a great sign. Early in the week, and it's reflected in the front end of the market here, not so much on the back end of the market. And we can talk about that a little bit more later on. Being that you led with the Tuesday comment, I got to throw a little. Remember way back when there was somebody that used to call Taco Tuesday. They had a saying about that, and I'm starting to think, Terrible Tuesday, or I'm trying to come up with a good little acronym for it. This is 3 Tuesdays in a row now that we've had some stuff, right? Screwworm, um, the rumor of a plant closing last Tuesday, and now yesterday dealing with this presence of ice, especially in the state of Nebraska, and especially in towns where there happens to be packing plants. So that was certainly in the market yesterday, and maybe everybody's sick of talking about it, but my best understanding is that they were not present at any of the cattle plants, that they were in town or in the cities. It did affect absenteeism. I know there was a couple of small regional, very, very small regional plants that didn't have enough help to run. I'm talking the really small ones. Then I know some of the other ones, like in Omaha, that had enough of a percentage of absenteeism that they were running, but not efficiently like they would otherwise. Now I understand that today is much better, and we fought this battle once. At the beginning of Trump's. When he came on, we went through this same thing, right? And you and I talked off air many times because you've got a connection down there. You live there, and hopefully this goes away like the other ones. That they're after the murderers and the drug dealers and not the guys that are just trying to have a job at a packing plant someplace. But that was certainly part of the problem yesterday during the day until the cash market came in, like you said, on a Tuesday, and then that's what pushed the market back to the upside, at least in the Junes yesterday.
Can we call it Treacherous Tuesday?
I like that. Sure, that sounds good.
Hopefully, it does not continue for week
Yeah,
number four.
let's get rid of that deal.
So as you look buying the buying that's out there and the strong cash that's out there and the box beef that continues, consumer perspective, you and I talked about that a little bit off air. They're still looking at that meat counter. They're still wanting to buy beef, but other red meats are proteins like pork and chicken are like, hello, come look at us.
Yeah. Boy, you ask a great question, and I wish I had a great answer. I don't. I can't tell you where that demand switch is going to flip, and I don't think anybody that really is honest with each other themselves can give you that. I'm looking for hints. Boy, this retail trade this week, every Tuesday that report comes out, it took a big hike this week. I'll tell you that. When you're looking at whether you're talking about the sirloins or the loin or the ribeye or even to a lesser extent, the burger, but that burger's been a lot higher than a year ago for a while now. I'm waiting for the where you just are inundated by the media, right? Telling the consumer, oh, this stuff is really high, until the consumer believes it, whether it really is or not. Now, I can come up with all sorts of smart aleck comments, about how much a cup of coffee costs or how much it costs to have a television. You got to have 5 different stream services to watch the programs you want, cell phones. I was in a restaurant that wanted to charge $190 for 2 crab legs Friday night. But we got to be sensitive to it. This is the time of year where you're going to shift every year away from that middle meat feature. And the middle meats, those are the steak cuts, the high price cuts. And if you listen and look at your local paper, I'll bet you'll see the same thing. We're going to switch now to more of a hamburger hot dog type of a deal. Once they got the meat bought for Father's Day, that's the way it transitions. So we'll see. Boxes typically go down this next spell. I think demand up to this point has been absolutely nothing short of remarkable. And I still, say that it's partly because of the COVID deal. They learned how to cook a steak at home, and they found out they liked it, and you can do it pretty economically and much cheaper than going to town. So we'll see. I wish I had a better answer for you, but at this point, I think we're still pretty good, in terms of where the demand is at.
WASDE came out. We don't normally talk about the livestock side of it, but as you look at the WASDE numbers from a cattle perspective, what are your thoughts?
I, I typically don't either, and I don't know that a lot of people really do. I mean, from a supply standpoint, projected supply standpoint, these numbers are going to stay tight for a long time, a year and a half or more, depending upon how quick this expansion cycle starts, if it ever really does. We've maybe started just a tiny bit of heifer retention, but what I worry about isn't something in the cattle supply numbers that'll change it. It'll be something that we can't anticipate. The dreaded black swan thing, something that comes off here, whether it's a bad economy or a tariff disruption or something like that. That's what troubles me about the market at these levels, more so than the cattle fundamentals.
Brad, you alluded to it a little bit ago, the futures, and those back months are very tired.
I agree. I think the last few days, if you watch the spreads like we do, it looks like we've kind of got to the point where the market is saying, okay, the front end is good. We believe you. There ain't enough cattle in the short term. Cash is king, and cash is much above futures. But we're starting to see, whether it's hedge pressure or whether you're seeing some liquidation here from some of the funds. I don't think you've seen much of that at all. Now, we get below 216, heads up a little bit. We get below 214.50 on the August, and really, okay, heads up here. I'm just trying to give you a couple of spots in the charts where I think that's going to be a trigger for the funds to start to come out. And if you don't think the funds are important, look what they did in the hogs. They bought them for 6 straight weeks, and they've gone up for that long. They started to get short the corn, and look where the corn's at. Even with good news today on the WASDE, nothing to show for it. Penny, big deal. So, keep an eye on a couple of those levels, but otherwise, cash acts good. And I think, there's not enough cattle in the short term to hurt us for a minute.
All right. And I know we're very current here in the North. It'll be interesting to see when we talk next week, how the markets have reacted. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you, Brad?
712-722-0023, or you can check us out at kkvtrading.com.
All right. Joining us today is Brad Kooima, and that's another edition of Cattle Chatter.
The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading.